Sex education is a journey of inclusivity, embracing the beautiful diversity of human experiences. Let's break down the walls of silence, encourage open conversations, and build a community where everyone's questions are answered and no one is left in the shadows. Extending our warmest greetings to the people tuning in. I am Shambhavi Saxena,
And I'm Priya Grover.
and we are your host for this podcast episode of The CC Squad through Ashisha.
We are so excited to introduce you all to our guest for the day, Miss Artika Singh. She is a comprehensive sexuality educator with over 7 years of experience. A gold medalist in public health anthropology from Delhi University, she is the founder of Taarini Foundation, a non-profit organization implementing sexual and reproductive health and rights projects. In 2021, she won the Young Person of the Year by SH24, NHS UK, and in 2023, she was nominated as a sexual health influencer at the Cosmopolitan Bloggers Awards. Apart from being a key topic of specialization, consent education is something that she is very passionate about. Ma'am, would you like to tell our listeners a little something about yourself that we might have missed in the introduction?
No, firstly, welcome to everybody who's tuning in, and thank you for the lovely introduction. I think you more than covered it. And I'm excited to see what you all have planned for today.
All right, moving on. Ma'am, firstly, let's talk about your interest in the field. What inspired you to work for this cause?
Right. I get asked this a lot, and it is a cause, like you said, but I think I grew up in healthcare family, and so healthcare is something that we've always taken very, very seriously, and we've had the privilege of taking seriously, right? Like healthcare comes with access and affordability. Um, saying that means that of course हर कोई healthy होना चाहता है, but हो सकता है हर किसी के पास उसके resources ना हो, affordability ना हो, या फिर access ही ना हो अगर affordability हो भी. So that is a core value that I grew up with. And that led me to study public health anthropology. Like you mentioned, I studied anthropology, in which one course was public health. And I think for a very long time, I'm a very people oriented person. I like doing things that require me to talk to people and interact with people and understand firsthand from people what the situation is. And anthropology allowed me to do that. It helped me to connect with people a lot. And I was already studying public health, but I think there was a point of time where I was not sure which of the fields I was going to narrow down in within anthropology. And at that moment, I think it was serendipity, like luck by chance, that I applied for a project that they were looking for people to head while I was still in college. And that project was in menstrual health education. So I would have, at that time, I would have probably applied to a diabetes project or any other project. But I applied to it and I got it. And then I worked on it for about 3.5 months. And I think at the end of the first month itself, I was sure that this is what I want to do because I couldn't believe it that I was in Delhi University, I was in Delhi, I couldn't believe it that the discrepancy in information was so large in a place like Delhi. And I'm from Uttar Pradesh originally. So I could only imagine that, as you keep going into the interiors of the country or even in like cities which are tier 2 or otherwise cities. And so this basically that was my inspiration. Working on it was my inspiration to continue working on this. And I've been very fortunate in that sense that I've always managed to get the right education, meet the right people to, even get myself to work in the field. I think the other inspiration is just that, things that I work on or that I talk about and, you all must be knowing are things that all of us are going through. So it was almost like instinctive and obvious to me that this is what I wanted to do. So yeah, I think those two reasons.
Thank you for sharing this, ma'am. I truly admire your refreshing outlook towards this field. Well, moving on, a question stems out for me in this that what are some of the challenges that you might have faced due to the perceived unconventionality of this profession? Can you tell us some common misconceptions that were associated with it and please bust them as well?
You mean that of like working as a sexuality educator or someone who's in sexual health?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's like an extremely tabooed field even now. Like I've been working in this for 6.5, close to 7 years, and I think it's only about like 2 3 4 साल पहले that my parents started saying what I actually do. उससे पहले even though they are like more open minded than like let's say a lot of other people, even they used to say that हाँ वो menstrual health में काम करती है, तो menstrual health तक का liberty tha, and then sexual health they of course always knew, but because it's tabooed, so it's like sex is always associated with your character somehow. It's a biological process, but it's also a very very cultural process. Like at any given point of time, who you're having sex with, what kind of sex you're having, what age you're having sex at, what circumstances you're having sex at is very much a social thing. And in India, but also in like a lot of other cultures and regions and religions, it's something that people use to judge you for. If someone's married and not having sex, they'll judge you. If someone's not married and having sex, they'll judge you. So there's no winning. So automatically, when you work in this field and you're not a doctor, तो lots of questions come up in people's mind कि ये क्या करते हैं और ये इसके बारे में इतने खुले से बात कर रही हैं, इनको शर्म नहीं आती है, so on and so forth. So I think those are the challenges which are real, and they make you feel bad and they make you feel demotivated when you're on this journey. But I don't even think those are the real challenges. The real challenges are the actual challenges when you're at work, when there are actual problems that you're unable to solve, when there are actual medical concerns that have no solution for, or no sort of outlet to get solved from. So it's like multiple things, but if you're resolute about doing it, and I think as is the case with anything else, any other profession, that if you're resolute about doing it, there are setbacks and then there are ways to overcome them. And of course we have days when we feel really bad and we feel really pushed down, and we have those days. Everybody has those days. So yeah, that comes and goes.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Acknowledging this profession is actually very important now. And we are so grateful for this very bold profession that you hold. Moving on, I have this next question. Curiosity. Curiosity regarding topics related to sex and relationships is very common during adolescence and teenage. Even we went through it.
Yeah.
Every person goes through it. So, how should that be catered to? And how can parents eradicate this barrier to awareness?
Yeah. I mean, I actually talk to a lot of parents in my work, and one of the things that keeps happening is that parents don't want to talk to their children about it, because a word which is very often used is like, we don't want to corrupt the young minds. And I get it. I get a parent's instinct to be like protective of their children, or of any adult's instinct to be protective of anyone who's younger than them. I think that comes from the place where they need to stop viewing it as something that can corrupt people and start viewing it as something that's going to be a part of their lives. And then from there, start navigating how it can be done. By no means is it easy, right? So when kids are very little and they ask you, some sort of question, people can still kind of pass it off as funny. But when you're in that middle ages, which is, maybe around 10 years to like 16, 17 years, if you ask certain questions, you're like considered bigda hua or badtameez or things like that. Like these are really common words we hear about kids. And the fact is that they're just curious. Just because you haven't talked to them about it does not mean they've not seen it on the internet. Does not mean that they're not hearing about it from their other peers who may have seen it somewhere else. Like they have exposure for it. So I feel like if you're the source who can provide information, that's such a great place to be in, because you can solve their misconceptions before they blow out of proportion, and they go into adulthood not knowing a lot of important information which they're going to use, like how long are you going to stop them from. The other way is that if you do like age appropriate and sensitized sex education, that can actually help your child be in a better place. So nobody's saying that it's okay for young children to be sexually active or sexually engaging. The legal age of consent in India is 18, and it's been increased from 16 to 18. And I comply with that, and I agree with that. But the idea is that only they will be curious at 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And if you tell them of the risks, then if you tell them of the information, then they'll just be better prepared for when they're 18. And again, 18 is the cutoff. They can have sex as late as they want to, post 18 also. Like, that's also completely okay. So I think age appropriate sex education is a word we use. And I think in my introduction, you said comprehensive sexuality education. And so that's where age appropriateness comes from, that a lot of times people think sex education is about how to have sex. Yes, that can be one part of it, which is more like leaning towards pleasure and techniques. But a lot of it is just like knowing about your body, knowing about anatomy, like what are your body parts, what function is what body part, what is something that you should go to a doctor for, what is something that's, okay and part of growing up. What are the bodily changes that happen, what are hormonal changes that happen, consent, like we were talking about. So sex is like one part of sexuality education, and so much of it is something that you can start as early as like 3 and 4 years of age. So I think that's my answer, that it's still challenging, and parents themselves will need to be informed and sensitized before they can even talk to their children about this. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this, ma'am. I agree with you because see, adolescents, they just need a helping hand actually. Like we need somebody to like guide us and help us, and we're not like privy to we're not privy to sharing our thoughts and emotions. We just feel like we'll be misunderstood and like we'll be like ki nahi karna and what you're doing is wrong, and they'll just like shut you down or like negate what you're feeling. So I really like personally felt very like inside I felt very nice hearing to all that you said. So like moving on further, I feel that since you've addressed the barrier but that how can parents eradicate this barrier, I feel that there is also an existing gap in sex education where certain topics are often omitted by our teachers as well. Additionally, there is
Right.
also a stigma around period workshops that exclude boys. So, like, how can we eliminate this stigma and promote inclusivity and integrate comprehensive sex education into our curriculum?
Got it. Yeah, I think that's just kind of connecting it with your previous question, that we talk about something called socialization, which is part of like child development. So socialization is basically saying that कोई भी बच्चा क्या कहाँ से सीखता है. Could be anything. Could be sex education. Could be math. Could be like how to behave in public. Could be like how to use the bathroom. All of that is part of like socialization. It's a broad topic. And so in socialization, then we talk about who all are the stakeholders of socialization. Stakeholders being कि ये लोगों से बच्चा कांटेक्ट में आता है, और any individual who's growing up कांटेक्ट में आता है, and यहाँ से ये potentially information gain कर सकता है. So the stakeholders are parents, the stakeholders are teachers in school, and one very, very big stakeholder are the peers. That no matter what you do, they are going to talk to their friends and they are going to learn from their friends. We all are going to learn, from our friends, even as adults. And the exact same model can be replicated for CSE, which is comprehensive sexuality education, that it doesn't have to be one source of truth. It could be a little bit that something that you learn at home. It could be a little bit of something you're taught at school, and it will always be a little bit of something that your friends say. Now, the beautiful thing is that if all your friends are learning proper and good information, it'll become like an echo box of even friends giving each other legit advice. And I think that would be the ideal scenario. It is not so right now, and I would say it's okay to not expect that to happen. But having said that, CSE should be taken as a specialized subject. Like, talking about barriers, that's another thing that comes us, because the government kind of semi-recognizes comprehensive sexuality education, and different state governments have different acceptance of it in India. It's very difficult to establish yourself as a sex educator in India right now, which leaves a lot of schools to think that unke existing teachers can teach it. In some cases, that might be true because those teachers may have put in the work to learn the extra things, right? They must have put in the hours to learn that extra thing because they know and they feel responsible for the children they're teaching. In another case, maybe the faculty does not put in that effort, which is okay because it's not currently part of their job role. So in such a scenario, it's actually good that there are so many independent educators who can be hired to do the job, who can be consulted to do the job, whose resources can be used for teachers to train them and then kind of learn from them. But that requires like a wave of change. It's almost like a revolution. I don't see it happening in the next 5 to 10 years, or maybe 10 years is too much. I don't see it happening in the next 5 years, which makes access to the internet very, very important, right? Everybody's using the internet, school kids and everyone else. So that also adds responsibility to people like us who are using the internet to teach. So yeah, I mean, the stigma, the school can be definitely a place to start breaking the barrier and breaking the stigma. And if they are not breaking it yet, because I can understand there being limitations within school structures also, right? Like if teachers teach something to school kids, their parents might get angry, right? Like it's a big machinery which needs to work very closely in coordination with one another to actually like make the whole project successful. So even if teachers are not being able to, or for whatever reason, not being able to make CSE projects in school successful, at least they shouldn't reinforce the taboo. So at least they shouldn't do like period workshops where boys are being separated. At least they shouldn't do bio classes where the chapters being skipped out. So I think that would be like a great place to start. But again, school teaching comes with its own set of challenges, which I can only comment on, but I don't know about fully.
Right, ma'am. Even I remember when I was in sixth standard, I had this period workshop and only the girls were called in, and we were like lying ki it was a different workshop and it was about cooking and or it was about reading or something like that.
How's
And
cooking for girls so much better than taking up
right.
separate?
Absolutely. And well, we hope that this comprehensive teaching becomes more strengthened in the coming years, hopefully. Um, Moving on, ma'am, let's talk about consent. Why is obtaining clear and enthusiastic consent crucial in all sexual interactions? And how does it contribute to fostering healthy and respectful relationships? And what is the right way to ask for consent?
I think you answered the question for me. So, you said why is it important in fostering healthy relationships, right? Healthy and safe
Right.
relationships. That is the answer. The reason we emphasize on asking for consent or like creating a relationship or a space where consent is important and consent is respected is because that is the only way to have a respectful, healthy, safe relationship where everybody's needs feel catered to and everybody's voice feels heard, and there's a minimum sort of risk in the interaction, and there's minimum chances of abuse and assault of any kind also. You of course asked in the context of sexual engagements and sexual encounters only, but that is the same answer that applies to why is consent important in any relationship. In like we're talking a lot about parents, so like in parent child relationship or school and like teacher and student relationship or even friendships or in the workplace. So it's the same. It's like consent is the basic like stepping stone to make sure that whatever interaction is going to happen, whether it's professional, romantic, fraternal, whatever it is, platonic, maybe, that interaction goes through in a way that's respectful and healthy and safe for the parties involved. And yeah, like the same definition for sexual consent, like consent in sexual scenarios. And yeah, I think you mentioned enthusiastic, which is like the Planned Parenthood uses this model of teaching consent where they say it's called FRIES, where FRIES stands for something. So like F stands for freely given, R stands for reversible, I stands for informed, E stands for enthusiastic, and S stands for specific. So they say like any consent should be all of these, 5 things for it to be an actual healthy form of consent. And then, in each relationship, this will apply differently. So saying that even if it's a hookup, it should be consensual, but even if it's a marriage of 17 years, sex, and that should be consensual as well. Um, and that's like the basic definition that we usually start teaching by. And then I think your next question was leading up to like, what is the best way to ask for consent? And I think we get asked this a lot, especially in the scenario of like sexual encounter, because a lot of people are of the opinion that asking for consent in the middle might ruin the mood. And I get where they're coming from. When I started off working, I used to be like, no, that's such a like stupid thing to say. Why would it ruin the mood? But I think over time I've come to like appreciate people's lived experiences, and I can acknowledge that, I understand where they're coming from when they say how it can ruin the mood. So I usually also share that like conversation about consent is something you can have beforehand. So you can have it even way before you've decided to sexually engage with a person, which is possible like in case you're dating, in case you're married, in case you're seeing someone long term. Will not be possible if you're looking at like a hookup situation. In that scenario, I'm just like, ask for it just how you'd ask for something else. So like just how you'd be like, can I get you another drink? You can also say, would you enjoy it if we did XYZ? Or would you like it if we tried ABC or whatever it is? So I don't think it has to be made a big deal out of in terms of like, oh my God, how do I ask it? Is there a correct way to ask it? No, I think the correct thing to do is to ask. How you ask it is okay. And yeah, following the fries model to ask helps because when we say F, which is freely given, that basically stands for the fact that you will not coerce someone into giving it. So it won't be like, I really want to try X with you. Please, 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 can I try it? Please let me try it. I really want to try it. Please let me do it if you love me. So that's not really given. That's like coercion. And then, following the RIES, that even if it's been given, it can be taken back. So it's reversible. Informed, as in the thing that you're asking for consent for, is something that the other party and you have full information about before they say yes, no, maybe. Enthusiastic, I think we discussed that nobody's doing it out of pressure and force and under circumstances where they actually can't deny it, like being held hostage, which is like a very real thing, right? Like that's cases of abuse and violence come out of spaces like that. And violence is a whole different category, but it also happens in people's relationship and they're not able to identify it as violence, but it is. And then specific is that you ask specifically for that particular act. So if you ask me if I want to have tea and I say, yes, I want to have tea, it doesn't automatically mean that I also want to have Coke, let's say. I might be in the mood for tea and I might not be in the mood for Coke. So, similarly applying it to sex.
Thank you for educating our listeners with this, ma'am. Now, whenever I think about fries, I'll firstly think of this and then I'll eat my fries. So,
And then about tea and then about Coke.
surely, certainly. So, furthering this consensual approach, I wanted to ask how can social and visual media help us in creating a better understanding about the importance of consent? And would you be able to suggest some series, movies, or books that a person should go through?
Yeah, absolutely. So, funnily, somebody asked me this question about what are like go-to movies for sex education. I was like, I don't know because I watch a lot of horror movies. And I actually don't watch a lot of, I don't even own a TV in, like, I'm in my parents' house right now, but I don't even own a TV in the actual house that I live in. So I watch like really strange, non-educational things, I guess. But just talking about the importance of digital media is undeniable. So I have worked for about 4 years on ground completely, and we didn't even use Instagram. We used to have an Instagram account, we never used it. And that was very fulfilling for me, and I really, really enjoyed every bit of it. But then when I started using the digital media during COVID is when I realized the kind of power of amplification it has. It allows you real-time discussion with people across the globe. So of course, a lot of people will have not the best things to say to you, but it at least allows that interaction. It also allows you to like connect with academics and people who have, like, let's say with me, who have had so much more experience of working in spaces like consent or sexuality education at large. And I just have free access to their resources. And the same goes with, the listeners, that if anybody is looking to like learn about consent, it's as simple as forget even Google, just like on Instagram, if you search hashtag consent, you'll find a lot of good information. And you'll find like abundance of information, like you can keep reading it the whole of the next year type of type of information, and we're all constantly making new content, so it's not running out or anything. In terms of like I don't know if people are reading books, I don't know who all are reading books, but there were two new books that came out by Indian authors actually and by Indian educators. One is called The Sex Book by Lisa Mangaldas, and the second one is by Dr. Cutris. I think the name of the book is the same as that. And I've read Lisa's book, and it's a really great book to learn about all things sex ed, written very, very candidly in a very easy to understand language for anybody who's looking to learn. I don't think there's an age limit to it. It's like anybody who's looking to learn anything about sex education, that's a really good compilation all in one place. There are, of course, like many, many, many more examples, a lot of which I have only read in bits and parts and then, use other sources. There's one website called It's Pronounced Metrosexual, which has like a free to take course, which is basically for users. It's not necessarily for educators only. It's like if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about gender, sex, and sexuality, it's free to take. You only have to pay if you want to buy a certificate, and if you're not looking to teach anybody else, you don't necessarily need to buy a certificate. Other than that, I don't know if there's a lot of good representation of sex in TV and media, at least none that I've seen, and not specifically in consent. I can think of a bunch of movies which are good, which are like a good representation of how relationships operate or how humans experience sexuality, but they are more, I would say, like they're a little more nuanced. So if you already know about the topic, then you might be able to watch them and appreciate them a lot more. Yeah, other than that, like OTT has a lot of sex. I don't know if it's educational per se, so I wouldn't suggest it. I mean, I would suggest it for entertainment, I guess.
Right, ma'am. Thank you for sharing these resources. Well, indeed, the power of amplifying something, some particular knowledge of media is impeccable, and that has to be used very efficiently by the people, of course. Moving on, I have this next question. Can you share your insights on how communication, understanding, and mutual exploration play a role in enhancing sexual pleasure for individuals in queer relationships? Additionally, are there any misconceptions that are there or stereotypes surrounding this topic that you believe needs to be addressed or debunked?
So I mean, your question was about like how can communication enhance and foster relationships, right? And sexual relationships and pleasure. And I think you asked about queer relationships. While specifically, of course, there are also a lot of queer educators who talk about queer specific sexual experiences, which I would not be the spokesperson for because they're people's lived experiences, and they should be the ones who should get to share it rather than me commenting on them. I just want to acknowledge and highlight that I don't know if queer relationships are like black and white as compared to heterosexual relationships. They're just a much newer concept. And if anything, they should only be differentiated to create a level playing field and one up it and to start accepting them as relationships. So, if you ask me, okay, like, are there specific techniques for like queer sex? Then yes, I may be able to answer that. But in terms of like communication to foster pleasure and mutual exploration, that will apply to all relationships the same. Then again, of course, like relationships and sex, we always also acknowledge that each person is different. They may be identifying as queer, they may not be identifying as queer. They just are different people, and being queer or not being queer is one part of their identity, and eventually the kind of sex they have or the kind of pleasure they enjoy or how they want to communicate will depend on a lot more than just their sexuality and their sexual identity. It could also be part of like their economic identity, it could be a part of their religious identity, it could be a mix of all, it could be a part of their caste identity in India, how you express and how you experience sex um, is a thing that depends on lots of other factors as well. Having said that, like of course, communication is really, really important for any relationship and any sexual experience to go from like 0 to 100. And it's again like a lot of times when we talk about sex, I want to talk about safety and risks. So communication is a way to create a safe space for anybody and all the people who are involved in a sexual experience. Because why assume when you can ask? That's it. Like literally, that's it. Like, why would you want to assume when you can ask? And you know why? It's not mysterious. I don't know. Like, you know, a lot of movies make it look like there's fun in the mystery, but there's also fun in knowing exactly what you're doing. Like, would you like to go in for like a test where you have to guess what the question would be, or would you like to go in prepared? I mean, I would like to go in prepared, and there might be cases that you know, you'll enjoy a little mystery, but you know, it's just that, like, that communicating with one another and like kind of developing that dialogue with another person, or having that communication with another person, can just help you feel a lot more prepared, a lot more grounded, a lot more informed about what you want to do, what the other person will enjoy. And then, of course, when we talk about enhancing pleasure, we talk about communication, because if I can tell you what I like and you can do what I like, and like, of course, this is not to say that like that it's a pressured situation, but that would obviously make me feel good. Like, again, you know, like it's the same thing as we were saying for consent, that if I say I want to have tea and you bring me tea, I will feel good about it naturally. You might bring me Coke and I might feel okay about that as well, but why not? No. So I think that's where that's coming from. And mutual exploration is also just something we emphasize on, because for people who are having partnered sex, it is a combined and joint experience. So the more you can spend time together, the more you can do together, whether it's talking or exploring or even watching informational content or reading about things together, it can help you build that bond much stronger. It's, you know, it's the same reason why we play video games with our friends, or we go drinking with our friends, that you're spending time together, spending time intentionally on getting to know about each other, in this case about your sexual preferences. So it can lead to good things. It can lead to realizing what the similarities are between you with it, which is something that you might enjoy. It may lead you to realize what the differences are between, you know, two people or more than two people, which is again a place that you can learn to explore, or you may want to try something new. Alternatively, it may also make you realize that this is not good for you, or maybe this is not something you're looking for in life, and you get that clarity out of it. And you know, in all scenarios, that's a good outcome to have, that you end up with more clarity about whatever situation you're in.
So, yeah, we thank you for this insightful answer, ma'am, because about queer relationships, and this was a very, like, we don't get to hear about it that often. So we are glad that you answered this question, and that too very insightfully. So thank you for that. Delving further into the concept of pleasure, I feel self pleasure is something that is not very openly approached and discussed. And sometimes people are often ashamed to even talk about it in public. So, why is it important to prioritize one's sexual pleasure?
Yeah. Yeah, again, I think the shame is just around anything that's sexual, and solo sex or masturbation or self-exploration is a part of it. So it gets the hate and the shame also. And I think it's why it's important. And like, I'm coming to your question on like why it's important, and I'll try and summarize it in some points. Number one, it's important because it's an absolutely normal part of development. So the minute a person hits puberty and the pubertal hormones start kicking in, and secondary sexual characteristics, as you know, biology books call it, start kicking in, the urge to sexually pleasure yourself starts coming up in a person's mind and psyche, and that's part of normal development. What happens is, though, that at that age you're so confused that you don't know what you're doing. If you know, if by chance accidentally for whatever reason you touch yourself, you most kids are bound to feel extremely guilty about it, or feel extremely dirty about doing it, or just feel like they're definitely doing something wrong. A lot of them will still continue to do it because that is the basic urge that's a basic biological urge that they're feeling at that point, and that's what it is, right? Like, it's like, if you really feel like peeing, you will want to go pee. Not that it's like peeing, but it's like biological in that sense, is what I'm trying to say. So number one, it's important to talk about it because it's going to happen to everybody. It's part of you know, development in humans, in actually a lot of animals, but also humans. What age that happens to a person, how strong the urges are at what age for what individual, of course, will differ. And some people will act on it, some people will not act on it, both of which are completely okay, and like, as long as you're comfortable and safe. But that is a reason why you should talk about it. I think number two is that it is a great way to know about your own pleasure, right? Um, it is a great way to kind of safely, without any fears and without any risks, explore what you even like and what you even find pleasuresome. There is no risk of creating a safe space with another person when it's solo exploration. Because everything said and done, creating a safe space with another person does take time and effort and certain amount of work, if I were to call it. Uh, exploring yourself also takes some kind of work, but at least it's not about feeling unsafe or feeling uncomfortable with another person. It's with yourself, and it's something you can navigate through. There is no risk of pregnancy. There is very little risk of infections in manually exploring yourself. And you get to know about, like, what are the different body parts, what does touching in different places feel like. The third thing is it helps you actually explore and learn about what the pleasure zones are. That there's like a lot of conversation around what sex is, and a lot of people believe that sex is just penis and vagina penetration, which completely neglects and kind of negates all non-penis and vagina sexual interactions, which could be queer couples, which could also be some heterosexual couples who don't enjoy penetration but enjoy other things. So solo exploration could be the first step of understanding what those other pleasure zones are on your body, those erogenous zones are in your body. This is not to say there is something wrong with partnered sex, there isn't, but this is also a good, legit way to do this, and you don't need a partner for doing it either. The fourth thing is that if you're looking at partnered relationships and partnered sex in the future, then solo exploration can actually help you enhance those as well. When you know what's good for you, you might be able to guide a partner. You might, if you have spent time on self exploration, you might be already in that mindset where you're open to communicating about your needs and understanding another person's or other people's needs in the scenario of partnered sex. So I think these things, and then of course there are some biological benefits associated also, which is more about like release of certain chemicals and neurotransmitters that happens in our body when we experience pleasure, which is more in the case of any kind of pleasure, but like including solo pleasure. So it improves period cramps, for example. It improves mood for some people. It will improve sleep for some people. So it's a regulatory function. Again, saying all of these things with keeping in mind that each individual is different and they might experience these things differently.
Right, ma'am. Self-exploration does seems a great option for this. And yeah, even this was very insightful. And even I read somewhere that it reduces period cramps, and I was so surprised, like, really? But yeah, it was true. So, moving on, I wish to ask you a question on public display of affection. When we talk about it, it is often frowned upon in our Indian society. So, how can public spaces be made safer? And what measures can be implemented to address this cultural sensitivity?
I don't have an answer for that. I'm so sorry. I'm not even trying to play it safe. I genuinely don't have an answer for that because, like you said, it's something that's very culturally rooted. So, in India, as well as a lot of other cultures, especially Asian cultures, um, and a lot of other cultures actually in the West as well, but largely, at least when we look at our part of the world, sex is something and relationships are something that are kept private, and that are the sanctity of it is in keeping it private. What my personal opinion is maybe very, very different, but we do live in the society that we do live in, right? And so in India, at large, at least in societies, public display of affection is frowned upon, like you said, because people believe that it is something that should be behind closed doors and in your houses and in your personal spaces. Having said that, there is what you're like basically asking for is like when and how can our culture change. That's what I don't have an answer for. I don't know when and how our culture can change. It's also a generational thing that a lot of the younger generations who have grown up very, very exposed to movies and films which are not necessarily Indian or Asian in origin have been now more normalized to sort of I wouldn't even call it public display of affection because that makes it sound like it's something that's exhibitionist or wrong. But they're more exposed to cultures where love and affection can be showed openly and can be showed in front of other people, can be showed in front of like your parents or your children or your family members. Because if you think about like Indian families and like an average Indian family, even parents don't kiss each other in front of their children. Forget like a marketplace or a park or whatever a mall. In like an average Indian family, or like anybody who's our generation, we may not have seen our parents kissing each other. In some families, we may have seen them hug, but like we may have not seen them kiss. So it's very, very deeply entrenched in the culture. As generations kind of change, and like I think when we like our generation will be taking up parental roles, maybe we will have a different outlook towards it, and maybe we will see things differently. And that's the only way culture changes. Yeah. So I don't know how you can make public spaces more safe for, or like safer for showing affection yet. I mean, I wish I had an answer. I just don't have an answer for it right now.
All right, ma'am. Thank you for sharing this view of yours. And I agree that, right, the generation, like our parents' generation, they kind of like do feel that it feel it in a stigmatized way that we're expressing affection in front of other people. So even if they're close knit family members, so I understand that. And yeah, changes do not happen overnight. It will be a very slow cooking process. And yeah, but like we can take it one day at a time, and hopefully I'm pretty confident our generation will be definitely be a bit more open about this aspect. So
Absolutely.
thank you for sharing your views on this. Ending on an optimistic note, surely, what is something that you would like to tell our listeners? Perhaps some words of wisdom.
Do I look old enough for wisdom? I don't, I don't know if I have any words of wisdom, but I think just kind of wrapping up from things which we've discussed today. And I think more than once I've mentioned like people having their own experiences, and, different people having different experiences, different everything and different views. So I think tolerance is something that goes a long way. One tolerance and kindness, one would assume like, what does that have anything to do with sex education? But ultimately, like, it's a very people centric thing. Sex education is for people. It's if I am talking to you, I'm not doing it in vacuum. We're doing it with the hope that, like, so many people, so many other people will hear us and maybe take away something from this conversation. So and that's how sexual experiences are. That, like, one thing I would love for everyone to take away is like tolerance and kindness can go a long way. Like, just because you've not done a certain thing, or you don't understand a certain thing, or you may have done it and you don't like a certain thing, doesn't mean everyone else who likes it or enjoys it or does it is wrong because they're different from you. That difference is like a very core part of us being humans. We are different. We're different in every way except that we belong to the same species, I guess. So tolerance goes a long way. But I find the use of the word tolerance in itself very violent, because it basically implies the bare minimum, which is like, just let me be in my space and you be in your space. And just going another step above that would be kindness, that like we are different inherently, and that's an acceptance that we should have as people. Even if your group is in majority, does not automatically mean that that's the correct thing to do. And so that's something to keep in mind, even in sexual explorations, in like meeting people from different sexualities or from different sexual preferences. And yeah, I think that's something I would like to say.
Yes, ma'am. This was very appreciable of you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time. More power to you. This has undoubtedly been an enlightening and empowering conversation with a plethora of knowledge about such a major issue, which the people, especially the Gen Zs, has to be aware of.
Thank you so much for having me.
Right.
And yeah, I look forward to seeing this and seeing you all in the future doing this amazing work.
Surely, ma'am. It is really important to have open and honest conversations about sex education, and genuinely to breaking down the taboos and stigmas that surround it. And by doing so, we aim to create a safe and supportive environment for individuals and to learn and grow in their sexual knowledge and experiences. I hope that our independent as well as combined efforts to contribute to eradicate the stigma associated with sexual education, pleasure, and sex in general can bring a positive change in the mindsets of people. Team Golab Shisha sincerely thanks you for taking out the time to speak with us today.